Okay, it is 9 o'clock. As promised, we are going to get started. Please do have a seat. I love it that people are talking. It's a good problem to have when no one wants to stop talking, but I'm still going to ask you to do it. Like every event, we're always tight on time, so we will be starting on time, hopefully ending on time, but definitely starting on time. Okay, so welcome to the 2024 Refed Food Waste Solutions Summit. I know it's very hard to leave your house these days, get dressed, travel, and make it here. You all did it. I did it. It's probably harder for me than all of you. So congratulations, you made it. No round of applause. We'll come back to that. We're really excited to announce this is the largest crowd that Refed has ever hosted at this summit. I didn't even say the number yet. You didn't even wait for the punchline. Over 700 people are here today. Now, thank you for the clapping. I always like to get to know a room a little bit, so I want to do a bit of a show of hands here. Please raise your hand if you're from the Baltimore area. That's open to interpretation. If you feel like you're from the area, you raise your hand. Okay, those are our tour guides. If anyone needs to know where to go, ask them. Raise your hand if you feel like you're pretty new to the food waste space. Again, open to interpretation. I see a bunch of hands. Okay, these are new people. Okay, raise your hand if you feel like you've been in this space for a while, really doing this work. You've been around the block with it. Oh, I see a lot of hands. These are our experts. Okay, I love it. Raise your hand if you've been to a summit before, a Refed summit, any year. Okay, great. Okay, raise your hand if this is your first Refed summit ever. Wow, quick clap for that. Welcome. And lastly, is there anyone I missed in the above categories? Did anybody raise your hand if you didn't get to raise your hand? There should be 0, but okay. We're good. All right. I am Christina Gilliutin. I have been a fan of Refed's work for many years. I'm a lifelong devotee to the food waste warrior crew. I've spent many years, most recently I spent many years at an organization called Red F, no relation, and if I say Red F later, I apologize. But Red F supports employment social enterprises. So through that work, I did support a lot of food-based businesses and continue to do some of that work now independently. So Baltimore. Welcome to Baltimore. This is one of my favorite cities to host convenings. I've always felt there's a certain energy in the city. People are always very excited, I think, to work on these social and environmental issues that are so important to so many of us. There's a lot of history here. We currently, on this present-day Baltimore land where we are today, it is the ancestral homeland of the Piscataway and the Susquehannock peoples. In 1706, the port of Baltimore was established. And then 1729, the town of Baltimore became a town. And in 1851, it became an independent city. I didn't know what that was until I Googled it last night, but it was very interesting. There's independent cities. I'll leave that for all of you to Google on your own. All right. In the 70s, there was an advertising slogan naming Baltimore Charm City. It was a tourism campaign, and the idea was really to say there's all this hidden charm in the quiet corners of Baltimore. And that motto stuck for decades. And most recently, they have a new motto, and they've really carried through this theme of discovery. And the new motto is, open yourself to the unexpected. Open yourself to the unexpected. And we felt like that's a really nice tie-in to this year's theme, because that's really why we all come together. We come together to see, to feel those unexpected insights from sessions, unexpected connections we make, unexpected insights, new perspectives in the work that we're doing. And the way we get there is to open ourselves up to the unexpected. So what does that mean for us, for you, for me, while we're here today and tomorrow? I really encourage you to do some of those unexpected things. Perhaps that means going to sessions you wouldn't normally go to. Maybe it's signing up for a no-host dinner where you don't know anybody. It's also just introducing yourself to people you don't know. I will say yesterday I've noticed, I think you're all actually pretty good at this, so I saw some of this happening, which is great. I'm also going to encourage you to raise your awareness of other people. If somebody's by themselves and you're in a conversation, please introduce yourself, bring them into the conversation. A lot of good things come from those kinds of, that mindset. So hopefully many of you had a chance to experience some of the charm of Baltimore yesterday. We had a number of optional activities, including there were field trips, international showcase, there were film screenings, and then of course we had a trivia competition. I would like to ask the winning teams, which was Spoiled Brats and Fresher Beats, please raise your hand. I was also Fresher Beats. That's not why I'm doing the shout out though. I also won. That was really fun. I highly recommend. It was less attended than usual, which is probably why I was on the winning team. But next year, I highly encourage it. The refed team did a great job with the questions. A lot of surprises in there. Okay, I apologize. Okay. Red lanyards, please keep an eye out for those. Those are the refed staff. One of the reasons we even host an event like this is for you to get to know some of the refed team members. In person, it always helps, as you all know. So please do introduce yourselves to them, tell them about your work, and just keep an eye out for them with the red lanyards. Okay, I'm gonna do a few quick logistics. The always popular host dinner sign-up sheets. Those sign-up sheets, can somebody confirm that I saw them yesterday downstairs, upstairs. Can anyone confirm where those sign-up sheets are? Right outside here. Thank you. Thank you, whoever helped me. Yeah, please do sign up. There are limited spots. They're first come, first serve. If it runs out, you can make your own. There is also the exhibition space out here you probably saw. There's some really amazing organizations showcasing their food waste solutions. Downstairs on the third floor, around the corner, is a really awesome art exhibit. It happens to be next to the Beehive that many of us learned about yesterday on the Convention Center tour. Highly recommend you take a stop at both of those places. Please do download the event app. All the information you need is there. We are not going to be covering the schedule up here. It is all there. If for some reason you don't have it, ask your neighbor or somebody else. And then social media. We do encourage sharing on social media. And we do believe in the power of FOMO, or as I like to call it, POFOMO. You're welcome to use that. And then please just hashtag it Food Waste Summit 24. That is not on there. Hashtag Food Waste Summit 24 and at refed. We really appreciate that. We want to make sure people are excited about what's happening here and that they want to attend next year. And of course, none of this would be possible without the funders who make all this happen. Last year, refed did announce a truly transformational grant from the Bomber Group. Some of that grant is supporting this event, and we are very grateful for that. We also want to put out a big, huge thank you to the summit sponsors. What's been really great to see is the variety of sponsors that really join us each year, and it just really speaks to the universality of these issues. And there's groups like large food businesses, tech companies, solution providers, family foundations, and more. So this year, we're really excited to have 5 gold sponsors. They are, I thought there'd be a slide, okay. Hellman's, the Lineage Foundation for Good, the Pamela and Byrne Murphy Family Foundation, Plus Brand Industries, and of course, the Betsy and Jesse Fink Family Foundation. Hold on, hold the applause. And then we also want to thank our silver, bronze, and scholarship sponsors, media partners, and on-site exhibitors. And with that, now give me all your applause to thank all of these sponsors without whom we would not be here. And without further ado, I'm going to bring up the Executive Director of refed, Dana Gunders, and as she makes her way up here, I hope she's thinking about something unexpected that happened to her because I'm going to ask her about it when she gets here. Dana, what's happened to you unexpected since you got here?
Ooh, good question. Yesterday we had someone join one of our panels for a pre-event who is someone I haven't seen in 10 years, and actually, it's Kavita Shukla. She runs a company called Fresh Glow that makes fresh paper, which is actually what I gave out at my wedding as like a giveaway. So it was kind of unexpected to see her, and it turns out she lives here, and that was really fun.
Good one. Thank you for leading us off with that. All right, I'm going to hand it over to Dana.
All right, thank you, Christina. Right? We have a professional MC this year. It's amazing to look out. Wow, this is a big room. This is really exciting. So great to see you all. And I just want to say it takes a ton of work to put this event on for you. So before we get started, can we give it up for the ReFed team? The entire ReFed team has put so much into this, especially Jackie Suggett, Lisa Cardy, Vanessa Mukebi, Lily Hurd, Sam Buck, and our event sponsor, Meet Green. And I do hope you get a chance to meet the team while you're here. I'd also like to just really recognize, and we're thrilled to have some of our board members here. Board members, can you stand up for a second, raise your hands? I see at least two right here. We are so lucky. We have the most amazing board. They are passionate, they are smart, they put so much time and commitment into us, so thank you all for being here. All right, so last week I was fortunate to have the honor to give a TED Talk. It was, thank you. It was like the most nervous I have been in a very long time. But I didn't trip, and people like kind of laughed at my jokes, and so I think they will go ahead and put it out there, and it'll help us get our message out a little bit further. But I have to tell you, it was a little bit frustrating to have to boil this topic down into 10 minutes. As we know, it's vast. That takes a vast oversimplification of it, and don't tell them, but I'm actually way more excited to have 2 whole days to geek out with you all on this topic. And just last night, talking to some of you, it is so clear, you are so passionate, you are so committed, and you are so ready to just get stuff done. So I just want to say thank you for bringing that energy and just really being ready to meet, where the rubber meets the road. And let me tell you, the rubber is meeting the road. As I was thinking about how to capture this year for you all, I was like, wow, gosh, things are really ramping up this year. And then I thought it was funny because it turns out last year when I was thinking about what to say, I was thinking, wow, things are really ramping up this year. So I think the momentum is just continuing, and it's just continues to be so exciting to be a part of this movement. For instance, on the policy front, last year, 4 federal and 91 state bills targeting food loss and waste were introduced, and 23 of the state bills were actually enacted into law, including waste ban bills in New Hampshire and Maine, though Maine still has another step to be completed. The EPA also launched its wasted food scale to provide more specific guidance on the preference for food waste destinations. And the Zero Food Waste Coalition grew significantly. This time last year, it had just been launched, and it already has over 190 members across 42 states. And among other things, several of the Zero Food Waste Coalition's recommendations actually made it into the Senate version of the Farm Bill. And also exciting, in the EU, there is legislation progressing through their process that would actually require member states, that's countries, that's EU for countries, to reduce food waste by 30% at retail and food service. This would be game-changing. On the funding side, we're continuing to see a steady stream of funding flow into the space. For instance, this year, a global philanthropic roadmap was published by big funders like IKEA and Bezos Earth Fund and Robertson Foundation. And it outlined $300 million of fundable projects. Now, not all of those projects have been funded yet, but some have since it was launched. And we also know it's been a really effective tool in bringing new donors to the space as well. smaller level, we were excited that ReFed's Catalytic Grant Fund was able to give away almost $1 million to 6 restaurant-focused grantees as part of a partnership with the Inker funder Toast.org. Yeah. On the private side, we've seen a bit of downturn in parallel to the larger market, but still strong interest. In fact, just our Food Waste Funder Circle members alone estimated that they've been involved in putting $190 million into solutions in 2023. Much of that is private. And then on the public side, we've seen a significant increase in federal funding with about $150 million from EPA, USDA, and USAID combined, and state and local funding beyond that. We also expect federal funding to continue through some of the other Inflation Reduction Act monies that are being distributed. I know that these are not huge numbers when it comes to, the overall government spending, but let me tell you, they have an extra zero as compared to a few years ago. On the business side, we were thrilled to be part of launching the U.S. Food Waste Pact. This is a national outgrowth of the Pacific Food Waste Commitment, which is a West Coast partnership. That's public-private partnership. And we announced the pact in December. It now has 13 signatories, and we'll be announcing more soon. And they've signed on to it's a voluntary agreement where they've committed to track their waste and work with their industry peers to implement waste reduction strategies. But with all that exciting action, there are really two key things that stand out for me from this past year. Excuse me. The first is, we actually have progress to report. Earlier this year, the Pacific Coast Food Waste Commitment, that partnership I was just mentioning, reported its retail signatories had a 25% decrease in surplus food from 2019 to 2022. Now, I've been working on food waste for almost 15 years, and this is literally the first time that we have progress to report at scale. Yeah, right? Let me dive in a bit deeper on this because I think it's really important to emphasize a few things. First, because we're talking about a decrease in surplus food, which means everything that retailers didn't sell, this means they prevented the extra food from happening in the first place. And at the same time, the retailers increased their rate of donations by 20% and the rate of composting by 28%. So not only were they generating less surplus, but less of that surplus was going to waste destinations. We estimate this reduction avoids as many greenhouse gases as taking nearly 270,000 cars off of the road. Now, all of this happened during the same period. We had the pandemic, we had supply chain disruptions, we've seen significant inflation, and more. So it's not necessarily all due to specific food waste reduction efforts. But because of those forces, businesses really stripped down to the basics and doubled down on streamlining their operations. And with food prices continuing to rise, or at least be as high as they are, I think there's still a moment right now where they're particularly receptive to prioritizing waste reduction as a way to reduce costs. The second thing that stands out for me from this year is COP28 this past fall in Dubai. For those of you who don't know, COP is the annual global climate summit where countries negotiate various terms around climate commitments and overall progress. It's a huge event with thousands of participants from around the world, and despite this being the 28th COP summit, this was the first one to have a truly concerted effort on food. There was a formal food day as part of the official schedule, almost 700 side events, and at least 18 specifically on food loss and waste. In fact, there was actually a food loss and waste day that was hosted by the Global Food Global Food Banking Network. And at one point, there were 4 different food loss and waste panels happening at the same time. 159 countries signed on to an official food declaration with a much longer name that you can see up there. But notably, reducing food loss and waste was only a handful of specific actions that are mentioned in that declaration. And there was more there. So needless to say, the world is starting to pay attention. And one of the main reasons is methane. As most of you know, methane is a greenhouse gas much more powerful than carbon dioxide in the short term. And because of that short-term effect, it's really being seen as an emergency brake, as Project Drawdown calls it, for a climate strategy. That is, stopping methane emissions now will buy us time to address other emissions like CO2 later. And so you have projects like the Global Methane Hub quickly getting to work on it. You have the Sunnyside Agreement, where the US and China committed to setting targets around methane. And then you have things like satellites launching. We had 2 satellites that are launching this year specifically to measure methane emissions. And there are really 3 major contributors to methane: oil and gas, livestock, and landfills. Sorry, if you could go back a slide. Just this year, Just this year, EPA published that had a report that for the first time actually quantified how much of the methane emissions from landfills are coming from food. And it was 58%. So what that means is that if you just look at the methane emissions from food, waste, and landfills, and you don't even include any of the upstream methane that comes from food, it's representing 10% of all of US methane. This is extremely relevant for businesses this year in particular, because both the SEC and the state of California passed laws that will require companies to report on their greenhouse gas emissions. And in the case of California, this will include what's called Scope 3, which is the category where waste falls. All in all, there's no doubt we're going to see a lot more attention to landfill methane in the coming years, and along with it, to food waste. The other thing I expect we'll see a lot of attention to is AI. I know, you can't go 10 minutes without hearing anything about AI these days, but reducing food waste is no different. Clearly, there are some corners of the food system that can benefit from AI to become more efficient. I think we've seen that as an example with forecasting for businesses. But the thing is, AI only works if it's based on the right data. So there are certain parts of the food system where it could help, but we don't have the right data. And we need to be able to train the models. But first, we need to be able to capture the data. And then I'm quite sure there are going to be other aspects of the food waste problem where, nope, sorry, it's just not going to eat those borderline leftovers for you. But at ReFed, we're certainly intrigued by the possibilities, and we'll be exploring them in more depth over the coming year. Before I close, I want to take a quick look at something that I've long found to be a parallel for food waste reduction, and that is energy efficiency. Both food and energy are resource-intensive sectors projected to have huge increases in demand over the coming years. In energy, there's been work to make sure it gets used, otherwise known as energy efficiency, for a long time, actually since the 1970s. And look what's been achieved. That huge orange section is all avoided emissions. And in 2021 alone, the United States would have had 78% higher carbon emissions from energy if it weren't for energy efficiency investments. I bring this up because I know that despite all the momentum that I just talked about, it can sometimes feel like we're working really hard and not seeing the results we want. So if you find yourself in that situation, just think about this curve, because when energy efficiency was our age, it was way over there on the left. We're still setting the foundation for big things to come, and we still have that whole big orange area in front of us to achieve. I know it's starting to work, though, and one indicator is that just a few months ago, as I was picking my kids up from school, I ran into this poster that I had absolutely nothing to do with. You can imagine how excited I was, and it tells me that a shift is happening. And I know you are the people who are going to take this shift further, because you're the ones who are here. You're the ones who are ready to listen, to learn, to connect with each other, and to act so that together we can make a dent in what we all know is the world's dumbest problem. Thank you. Thanks, everyone. And now to our next speaker. As Christina said earlier, we have to open ourselves up to the unexpected, right? Well, a few years ago, I didn't in my wildest dreams expect that I could be up here introducing our next speaker. We are simply thrilled to have U.S. Secretary of Agriculture, Thomas J. Vilsack, join us today. Yeah. Appointed to President Barack Obama's original cabinet, Secretary Vilsack was reappointed to the role by President Joe Biden. He has led the USDA in its work to transform the food system, and part of that effort involves reducing food loss and waste. Under his leadership, USDA recently announced the expansion of its interagency collaboration with EPA, FDA, and USAID to focus on the issue, with ReFed serving as a nonprofit advisor. And their work includes producing educational and guidance materials, conducting outreach, community investments, voluntary programs. We'll hear more about it in a moment. Technical assistance, policy discussions. And in recent years, USDA has invested nearly $60 million of the American Rescue Plan Act funds to reduce food loss and waste and spur action across the country from farm to table. And now, with the potential for a new farm bill this year, there are even more opportunities for food loss and waste solutions to be integrated into the food system. So please join me in giving a big round of applause to Secretary Tom Vilsack. Would you prefer this?
I'm afraid I'm old school, so I'm going to do the microphone and the lectern, if that's okay. It is great to be with all of you today, and I will tell you that as I thought about these remarks, my grandmother's voice was in the back of my head. My grandmother was a woman who raised 4 kids during the Depression after her husband had a stroke. And she was very, very focused on ensuring that nothing was wasted at our home. And I can remember vividly the butter dish that was at our dining room table. And she would scrape whatever was remaining from the plates of butter that had been unused and put it back on the butter dish because she just couldn't stand the notion of food waste. And she understood that because she had experienced a time of want, a time when the country was in depression, and she understood the value of everything that was being produced and that was available. You know, tragically, we, as you all know, and that's why you're here today, we've sort of transitioned away from that mentality. And so today, I just want to acknowledge all of you who are here today, and I want to thank you for your passion and for your commitment. And I want to acknowledge the good work of ReFed. You folks have understood the necessity of having a holistic view about our food system here in this country. You understand the power of collaboration and commitment. And I think you have decided to focus on a serious issue, a large-scale, meaningful issue that requires significant impact in order for us to make progress. I think you understand the importance, and you've seen it in the presentation today, of the importance of understanding where we are, the utilization of data and insights. You understand the importance of catalyzing capital and directing it towards new innovations and greater awareness. And you are in the process of slowly but surely mobilizing the rest of us to be as committed and as focused and as passionate as you all about this extraordinary challenge. You all know these statistics, but I think it is startling to know that somewhere between 30 and 40% of the food that is produced in this country goes unsold or uneaten. That has a value of $473 billion, not in addition to the greenhouse gas impact that we just saw with 58% of our landfill methane being directly connected to that food. That's essentially the equivalent of 30% of passenger vehicle transportation emissions on an annual basis. It's an enormous, enormous amount of methane. So in 2015, I was secretary before, and I remember teaming up with our team at EPA, and appreciate Rod Snyder, who's here today from EPA, that we decided that we needed to begin the process of raising the awareness about this issue. And so we announced boldly the notion that we were going to reduce food loss and waste by 50% by the year 2030. I wish I was here to report to you that we in the U.S. government have done our job and that we're very close to meeting that goal. But the reality is we're not, and you know that. One of the things that we haven't had, that we needed to have, that we probably should have had in 2015, was an overarching and overriding national strategy, a way of basically coalescing the effort around a true national commitment on the part of all of us to participate in this effort to reduce food waste and loss. Well, that was true in 2015. It was true as up to today. But it's no longer true, because I'm here today to announce that we're actually launching the national strategy today. The Biden and Harris administration made a commitment at the White House Conference on Hunger, Nutrition, and Health, which was the first time we had such a conversation with the country in over 50 years about those important issues. We all made a commitment, we meaning the EPA and the FDA and other federal agencies. We made a commitment to get serious about this issue. And today we begin that process of delivering on that promise. Now let me just outline that this national strategy basically has 4 primary objectives. First of all, we want to focus at the beginning of the process. We want to take a look at what happens on the farm and what happens from the farm to the processing operations, and ultimately getting to the door, if you will, of the retail sector. What happens in that supply chain, and making sure that we do everything we can to raise awareness on the part of farmers and processors to prevent loss to begin with. And then we want to focus as well, as we have already seen today, on an area of our economy, the retail and food service sector, and households that obviously have an incredibly important role to play in terms of preventing waste. And as you can see, a number of our retailers and a number of our processors and food service operations are indeed getting engaged in this conversation and discussion and are committed to it. We want to increase the recycling rate of all organic waste, and we want to support the policies and create the incentives that will encourage over time the prevention of loss and waste and encourage organic recycling. So these are 4 areas that we're focused on. We believe that if we follow through with this strategy, we'll reduce greenhouse gas pollution connected to food loss and waste. We'll help to create an economy that will support this. This isn't just about focusing on food loss and waste. It's also about the economic opportunity that is lost when we do engage in food loss and waste, and the economic opportunity that can be developed and arise from a concerted effort to avoid food loss and waste. And it's also an opportunity, I think, for us to address as well the environmental justice issues that are connected to this particular issue. And of course, it will reinforce and recommit ourselves to supporting the U.S.'s commitment on methane reduction. The reality is every single person in this country has a responsibility and needs to be motivated and activated in order to get the goal of reducing our food loss and waste by 50% by 2030 to be realistic and to be achievable. Now, the fact that we didn't have a national strategy until today didn't stop USDA and other federal agencies in this administration from focusing on this issue. As was mentioned, we recently resumed and renewed our MOU with the Food Waste Reduction Alliance, which is consisting of the associations that represent consumer brands, the associations that represent the food manufacturers and restaurants across the country. We also, at the federal level, agreed at USDA with the EPA, the FDA, and USAID to continue our collaboration. And it's incredibly important for us to have a consistency in what we do and to be aware of what our sister agencies are doing so that we leverage their resources, their talent, their ideas. We are working with the EPA to expand significantly the number of U.S. food waste and loss champions. These are organizations and entities that make pledges to focus on their individual piece of this challenge and making major commitments. And these are major companies and major organizations committing to reducing waste. Some examples of companies that have made a concerted effort in this space are companies like Starbucks, the Hilton chain, Kroger, and many, many others. It's not just signing MOUs. That's frankly a relatively simple thing to do. I think it is about the level of commitment, and that's often reflected in Washington, D.C., in the halls of government with the resources that you put behind those commitments. And we have seen an extension, a continuation, and an expansion of the resources that we've made available. We have roughly $37 million that we have invested in cooperative agreements, roughly 40 cooperative agreements with organizations and entities that are committed to composting and working on food waste reduction strategies within our urban agriculture centers. There's 17 centers across the United States where we're trying to commit to a promotion of urban agriculture, and as part of that, looking at ways in which we can compost more effectively. We've also created a series of community food projects where we attempt to connect unused food with the need that exists in communities among those who are financially struggling. So that is a commitment. We've also invested in research. Oftentimes people don't understand the significant investment that USDA makes in a variety of research areas. So over almost $70 million has been committed since this administration began in 76 research projects and awards really focused on innovation and collaboration. An additional $7 million has recently been focused on how we might be able to extend the shelf life of foods that we see in grocery stores, particularly fresh fruits and vegetables. How do we extend that shelf life? We've worked very, very hard to try to increase the awareness and the understanding of steps that people can take on the farm and in the home to reduce food loss and waste. So you'll see the USDA continue to invest in publications, in using our capacity, our research capacity, to better inform folks. And we recently, and are announcing, we have announced recently, $2.5 million committed to testing the effectiveness of different consumer messaging. This is going to be incredibly important for us to be able to figure out what it is that's going to motivate and move ordinary folks to get focused on this issue and to be conscious of it and to be taking steps in their home and when they're out and about that will help reduce food loss and waste. We're continuing to invest and continue to encourage our researchers at our ARS, our Agricultural Research Service facilities, to look at new technologies that will be energy efficient and will support the notion of food loss and waste reduction. And we're doing all of this for very obvious reasons. We're doing it because we're committed to a better environment. And we're not just focused on food loss and waste, we're also asking our partners, the people we deal with, the farmers, the ranchers, the producers, to be more engaged in climate-smart activities, ways in which in the production of food, in the production of crops, in the raising of livestock, that they can address the challenges and the opportunities that are involved in this space. And so we've invested resources in over 135 major projects involving more than 100 of the major commodities grown and raised in this country, encouraging farmers to embrace climate-smart practices, over 200 of them. We're going to measure, monitor, and verify the results of those activities, and we're going to basically make sure that farmers see the economic impact and effect of climate-smart practices. We can do the same thing with consumers. We can do the same thing with folks in their homes. We can make the case that by being conscious of food loss and waste, that you can actually save money. As we deal with tight budgets, the fact is about $1,500 on average can be saved by the American family if they become more conscious about food loss and waste. If we provide them techniques and technologies and ideas for how they can use those leftovers more creatively. And a lot of that activity is happening. You all are engaged in making sure that it happens, but it's really about making not just the environmental message, but also the economic message. It gets back to my grandmother. She was making the economic message to me when she was scraping those butter dishes. And when we make the economic message, we also create the job opportunities that are connected and associated. This is about a new economy here. This administration understands that a clean economy is the new economy. It's the new 21st century American economy that helps America lead the rest of the world. It wasn't just because folks decided that food needed to be a focus of COP at the UAE. It was because the United States and the United Arab Emirates came together to form AIM for Climate, which was focused on innovation, and the minister who I partnered with, Mariam Al-Mahari, she made sure that food and agriculture had its day at COP. It was an understanding of the necessity of raising awareness and making commitments. It's about jobs. It's about a better economy. It's about more and a better environment. And it's finally about the notion of a major effort that doesn't distinguish between right and left, R and D, north and south, east and west. This is an issue that ought to bring all of us together. There are ample reasons why we all ought to be committed to this, because it just simply makes sense for us as a country to stop wasting. And in doing so, maybe, just maybe, by the collaborations and the partnerships and the connections that you all help to facilitate, maybe, just maybe, we begin to relearn the notion of community in this country. And in doing so, maybe that has a profound impact, not just on food loss and waste, but on all the other issues that are so important. So that's why I'm here today, to understand and to acknowledge to you the significance of what you're focused on, the importance of what you're focused on, the appreciation that we have for the passion and commitment that you bring to this, and for you to leave here understanding that this is a really big issue and a really important time for the work that you're doing. We've made progress. We have to make a lot more progress. And I think it's up to you and me and all of us to make it happen. Thank you very much. Probably quit while I'm ahead.
All right, great. Wow. It's incredibly exciting to hear about this, and just kind of a dream over here on my side of the stage. So congratulations on releasing the national strategy. But none of us have had a chance to read it yet, so appreciate the summary. Can you tell us a little bit more about what it means for USDA moving forward, and like how much of the strategy is new, and how much is kind of more leaning into successful initiatives you've had?
You know, in a sense, nothing of it's new. I mean, if you think about it, it just simply breaks it down and essentially establishes that as you look at each objective, you realize they are component parts of a comprehensive approach. And that what has been lacking has been the need to tie everything that we're doing together and to funnel it into a national strategy so that people see their part, all right? That it isn't just up to Starbucks to do work in their coffee business. It's up to me and my home. It's up to me when I'm at a restaurant and I get a portion size that's enough to feed a family of 4 to say, hey, I'll tell you what, give me a half order of the French fries. And probably my cardiologist would say no French fries, but I mean, the reality is that we just get overfed. We really do, especially when we eat out, because I guess the theory is, you're spending a lot of money and you want to feel like you got the biggest bang for the buck. Well, where does all that go? Well, it goes ultimately in the landfill, and then we pay for it. So nothing new here, but what it does is it creates it's an accountability document. It's like you can't hide anymore. It's like you can't say, well, that's up to the grocery stores to do, or that's up to the restaurants to do, or that's up to, the farmers to do. No. Everybody's got a role in this national strategy. So, if you're not doing your job, that's a problem. And so I think what it does is it creates accountability. It also, I think, sends a message, and you all know this, bureaucracies being what they are, you have to constantly remind bureaucracies of what's important, because there's so much that they're asked to do, right? So by having a national strategy, you're essentially raising the priority and awareness within the halls of the EPA and the USDA and the FDA and everybody else, so that there's a recognition, hey, I've got to figure this out when I'm computing my budget. I've got to figure this out in terms of staffing. I've got to figure it out in terms of who does what and how do I hold them accountable. So I think the importance of this, from my perspective, is accountability and focus. And now the challenge, mention was made of the Farm Bill. Obviously, it's great that it's in the Senate Democratic version of the Farm Bill, but the reality is we're a long, long way from getting a Farm Bill done because of a lot of other issues. I think we'll find consensus on that issue. So the key here is obviously developing a Farm Bill that actually is realistic and reasonable, that includes this. So then it is another way of saying to the government and to the government agencies, hey, this is important. There's an expectation that you're going to do something in this space. And I think we've got to find the right messaging, and I think the national strategy is going to help us do that.
Interesting. Yeah, we see accountability being necessary, not just in the government, but in anyone who's working on this, right? Adding it to incentives and things like that.
Well, and you mentioned the SEC rules and alike, and that's another method of holding people accountable by saying, what are you contributing to the challenge that we face, and what are you doing to reduce your contribution? That makes the corporate folks also conscious of, hey, we got a responsibility here, and we have a benchmark that we're judged against. It shouldn't have taken as long as it's taken to raise the level of awareness about this issue. I mean, you mentioned it. I mean, this is really a stupid problem, or a dumb problem, as you mentioned it. And it's a problem that there's just so many ways that you do right by it, right? So I'll give you an example. So, one thing you do is you improve the nutritional quality and value of the meals that you're serving at school so that kids are more apt to eat them than to not to eat them, right? So that all of a sudden food loss and waste bleeds over into better nutrition, and that bleeds over into better health consequences for kids. And that bleeds over into what do we do for families that are struggling financially? How do we help them stretch that food dollar? Well, one way is by saying, hey, here's an interesting recipe. When you've got a little bit of this and a little bit of that, you put them together, and all of a sudden you've got a great meal, and you haven't wasted that food. So it all kind of ties together. And I think that's also a part of a national strategy, is to make people think about, what are the connections? How do you tie it all together? How do you raise the awareness and the significance of the issue? Sometimes it's so simple that it's like, well, of course we'll
we'll try to prevent food loss and waste. We'll do that. But then you go to a restaurant, you get an order of French fries that's enough for a family of four, and what do? You don't eat them all, or maybe you do and shouldn't, but you don't eat them all, and I mean, it's just tragic.
Yeah, I always say there's only two things happening to those extra calories, right? Either we're eating them and we're not, and either way, it's trouble, right? Well, I want to go back to 2015 for just a moment and acknowledge that, because I was working on this back then, but I knew almost nobody else who was. And so I just want to acknowledge that you really led the way on adopting the goal to cut food loss and waste in half back then. And a bunch of time has gone on since. And actually, our numbers show that since 2016, if you use that as your baseline year, numbers have actually increased a bit. So I'm just curious, why do you think it's increased, and how optimistic are you at this point that we can meet that 2030 goal?
Well, I think part of the reason it's increased is because, candidly, it's relatively easy to have a press event, to set a goal. It's relatively easy in this process to go out to companies and say, hey, be a champion, and then sort of put that as the 48th priority on the things that you're working on, okay? I mean, that's the reality. And so what's different now, I think, and you mentioned it, there is now serious global concerns about methane. And you're not going to control methane unless, as you pointed out, you really do two significant things. One, reduce that food from going into the landfill, and two, work with the livestock industry in this country and around the world to significantly reduce the methane that's produced. And there are amazing innovations that are taking place on the latter. I mean, I was at a dairy operation the other day where they take the manure from the dairy operation, they put it through a digester, and they sell the methane to a renewable natural gas company, so it gets reused as energy. They take what's left and they use it for bedding for their cows. Then when that's kind of saturated with this and that, they go put it through another process. They extract organic material that operates as a fertilizer for phosphorus and nitrogen, which they apply on their land. And what's left after all of that is water that's clean enough to go into a river or stream and comply with Wisconsin's very strict water quality requirements. Well, now that is, no, so why are they doing that? Well, they're doing it because there's an economic motivation. You sell the methane, you don't have to buy the fertilizer. Now all of a sudden, golly, you're saving money and you're making money. Well, we at USDA incented that to a certain extent. We provided a grant. So I think the message here is, on the food loss and waste side, you've got to create the economic message in addition to the environmental message, and you've got to figure out a way to incent that. And you've sort of done it with product liability laws that basically say if you donate food, you don't have to worry. All of those things are incentives for the corporate restaurant chain world. But now the question is, how do you do it in the household? And I think the way you do it is by saying, you want to save $1,500 on groceries? Here's how. Here's what you need to do. Pretty simple, really, at the end of the day. And then you have to empower people to be able to do it. It's one thing to say, you should use your leftovers. It's another thing for folks to know how to do that. You can't just be a Michelin chef. You need to be a mom or a dad who's trying to put food on the table for hungry kids in 15 minutes. You have to think about the practicalities of it. But if you give them the resources and the tools, just like the corporate world, you give them the resources and the tools, they're going to respond. So I think we have to make the environmental and the economic case. And I think if we do that, we'll begin to see greater adoption. And I think over time you'll see those numbers change. We didn't do that in 2015. And I think, we didn't do it because the first thing we had to do was to say, hey, this is a problem. People didn't even realize it as a problem, right?
Yeah. No, absolutely. And I always say nobody wakes up wanting to waste food, right? They just don't know what to do with the wrinkled tomato when they're standing in their kitchen at 5 p.m.
That's
so,
right. That's exactly
yeah.
right.
I wonder if you could say a little bit more about what it means that you're piloting a consumer education campaign, because I know many of us have been eager to see more happen on that consumer side.
Well, I think it's, well, first of all, understanding that the notion of consumer isn't monolithic. You're a different consumer than I am. And a message that may resonate with you may not resonate with me. A message that resonates with certain populations may not resonate with other populations. I learned this. My wife Christy was engaged and involved in reproductive right issues, and how you would convey messages about long-acting reversible birth control was different depending upon the audience that you were speaking to. And so in some populations, hairdressers become a conveyor of messaging that's trusted. In another population, a radio soap opera kind of thing can convey a stronger message. In other areas, humor can be effective. So I think our challenge, is to figure out, okay, are there core messages that work? And are there methods of delivering that core message to populations that are more or less effective? And then once you know the answer to those questions, well, then you can begin to direct your education initiatives in targeted and more likely successful ways than having a single message, blasting it out and hoping that it lands with everybody, when in fact it may not land with but just a few people because it's not the right method or it's not the right message. And I think that the earlier discussion about the environmental and economic message, I think, is an example of that. If you make the environmental message, there are a lot of us that will say, yeah, this is really important. There are a lot of us that will say, I don't want to hear anything about that. But you make the economic message, now all of a sudden you've got some skeptics over here saying, tell me more about how I can save $1,500.
Yeah, and I think as prices have risen, that it's kind of people are more receptive in this moment than even before.
Well, yeah, that's right, because people, this is a time of significant transition. We transitioned out of the pandemic, but it obviously has had an impact on all of us. We're transitioning in terms of the economy into a new and different phase. Part of it, as you mentioned, with the energy sector, why is that the chart that you showed, the orange? Why did that happen? It's because somebody said, if you have renewable energy, it's less expensive, and farmers are putting windmills and solar panels, and why are they doing it? Because it brings down their power costs. Right. So it made the economic message, and if it happens to be beneficial for the environment, well, that's great too, but it's saving me X number of dollars a year.
Yeah, well, we're going to have to update your $1,500 estimate
it's
because
probably
ours is around $2,700
okay,
now.
$2,700.
So we just have a couple minutes left. I'd love to hear kind of maybe an example. This is complicated, and it means it's very different, right? People talk about food waste as if it's one problem, but it's actually very different on the farm than in the restaurant, et cetera. So I'm just wondering if, from your vantage point, there's been one kind of corner of the food system where you've seen success already on this topic.
Well, I think I mentioned it earlier. I think the schools are doing a better job of this. I think, and again, the motivation is, there are multiple motivations. There's the environmental motivation, but there's also the economic motivation of nutrition experts trying to figure out, how do we stretch limited food dollars with food costs are higher? How do we stretch it and still produce something kids want to eat? And I think it's also the food professionals in schools have been unleashed. They've been empowered because we're investing in their capacity to do things from scratch, their capacity to actually be more creative and more innovative. We've provided grants to schools for equipment. We've created cookbooks. We've created a healthy meals incentive program where we're investing resources to try to figure out, how do you create a healthier environment? How do you provide meals that are better? And we've put pressure on the industry by the school meal rule that basically says, look, you got to reduce the sodium, the sugar, and you got to figure out creative ways to make it still tasty. And that means they're putting spices. They're developing really creative ways of addressing it. So in a way, all of a sudden it becomes fun, right? It becomes something that's good to do. So I would say the schools are seeing less food waste because they've made the meals better. I think they're going to continue to do that. And if you match that with with the poster that you saw, with kids being cognizant. And now what you're seeing are kids basically saying to schools, look, I appreciate that you've given me an apple, but I'm really not interested in the apple today. I will be tomorrow, but not today. What do I do with it? Well, how about you put it on a table, and a young person who's interested in the apple or sees this as a way of maybe having a snack on the way from school takes that apple. Now all of a sudden the apple gets consumed. It doesn't get thrown away. So you're seeing young people, and boy, there's just you know this as a parent. There's amazing power if kids come home with an idea, right? And it's an idea that, gee, well, this is great. They're really thinking about this stuff. Then all of a sudden it's like, well, what, Mom, Dad, what are you doing about this, or what are we doing about it? And all of a sudden they are the conscious in the home, right? They're going, Mom, this is food waste. Can't we do something? All of a sudden, they're basically making the adults more conscious, right? So I think the young people are tremendous. They're open to new ideas, and I think that's a vehicle for moving this forward.
Yes, they are little change agents. There's no doubt about it. They're little change agents. They're little foodies, and they're way smarter than we are, really. So, yeah. Well, any last word of hope you wanna give out to everyone as we close here?
No, just to reiterate, you all are extraordinarily important. The fact that there's as many people as there are here today is an incredibly hopeful sign. You all have your own social networks. You all have your own spheres of influence. When you start thinking about the multiplication that can take place in this room, literally, there's nothing you all can't do. And when I was younger, I often thought about the George Bernard Shaw's comment of some people look at things as they are and say why, others dream of things that never were and say why not. And I think this is a group of folks that are constantly saying why not, why can't we figure out a better way? And that's why I'm here today to say thank you for what you're doing and what you will do.
I love it. Thank you so much, Secretary.
Thank you so much to Secretary Vilsack and Dana for that fantastic conversation. Can I get one more round of applause? Thank you so much for making time for us today. I know I was furiously scribbling some notes over there. Something that really stuck out to me is this concept of we all have a role to play. And I know I think about that a lot. I think within a society, especially when you're talking about these really large, daunting issues, I hope we can all go back to that mentality of what is the role that we have to play. And he mentioned his grandmother with the butter dish, but I hope we can all shift back to that. Many of you get to do this professionally, but I think even those that don't, what is their role and how can they all fit into this system? So I really appreciated those comments. Okay, we're gonna switch gears here a bit. I'm gonna bring up Alex Corey, REFED's Vice President of Capital Innovation and Engagement. She's going to lead a conversation around some innovators who have taken some business ideas from startup to scale, and we're going to hear about how that was possible. So Alex, come on up.
Hopefully we have enough mics up here. Thank you. Don't you all wish you walked around with Secret Service behind you? It's just so cool. So wonderful. Well, thanks for joining me, everyone. Well, we only have about 25 minutes for our conversation, so I'm really excited to dive in here. This is my 6th or 7th ReFed conference in just as much time here at ReFed. As I look out at the audience here, of course, with these bright lights shining, more than 700 individuals who are here. I want to recognize all the different backgrounds, ethnicities, perspectives, experiences that we all bring to this topic. It's very clear to me, though, that we obviously all have one thing in common, at least, which is our unrelenting drive to scale food waste solutions as quickly as possible, because we know we do not have the time nor the food to waste. So I'm really excited to have this panel today and these panelists joining me. Our hope is that we have a really tactical and practical conversation with some founders about what it takes to scale. We want to understand that, and our hope is that you walk away with some really actionable tips and lessons learned along the way. So let me introduce the panelists that I have here today. So first up, Josh Dominguez. He's a founder and executive chairman of Flash Food, which, like many of you, is on a mission to feed families, not landfill. They are a marketplace for grocery retailers to really sell their expired food, or their near expired food, pardon me, at deep discounts for the shoppers in their communities. They sell things like produce and meat and dairy, deli foods, and it's really impressive some of the stats they've been able to post to date. So I think you guys have rerouted more than 100 million pounds from landfill, which is exciting, and you've helped consumers save, I think the number is $250 million, which is great to see. And you're working with more than 2,000 retailers, your local Stop and Shop, your Hy-Vee, your Giant Eagle, Loblaws, even, of course, up in Canada. So welcome.
Thanks for having us.
Absolutely. Next, we have Seth Goodman. So Seth, along with his brother Noah, is co-founder and CEO of North Star Recycling. So we've got prevention, we've got recycling shown on the panel here today. And it's really exciting. About 4.5 billion, with a B, pounds of waste diverted at North Star Recycling. And food and beverage is their #1 vertical. Of course, you guys are working, you're a fully remote organization, 250 employees nowadays, asset-light provider of sustainability-focused waste and recycling solutions. And they're working with brands that you might have heard of, like General Mills and Mars and Land O'Lakes, Bimbo Bakeries. And you guys partner with more than 1,000 outlet partners to help drive the impact that you're having. So it's exciting to have you as well. And then last but not least, of course, we have Mr. Jesse Fink. He is a venture philanthropist and impact investor working on solutions to climate change. I think that probably means you've analyzed hundreds of investment opportunities into the food waste space to date. And of course, he's the founder of ReFed. He's a board member emeritus. And if that wasn't already enough, in a past life, you ran a little bit of a startup. You were co-founder and COO of a travel site called Priceline that just a year after launch went public. You had maybe 3-5 employees and 250 or so by the time you guys went public. So we have some really great gentlemen up here who seem to know a thing or two. So let's kick things off, Jesse, maybe starting with you. I don't want to minimize this moment we just had with Secretary Vilsack on the stage. Just talk a little bit about what this means to you to have him, here, and what this means for the space.
Great. Thanks, Alex. I have to pause for a second, and I knew that I would, because when I look out at the room, this is really just an amazing group of people. And we all have moments in our professional life and our personal life that are meaningful. And I would say this is one for me, to just look out at the room and see over 700 people who are all committed to food waste solutions in the for-profit, the nonprofit, government, and all of that. So it it's an honor to be here with you all, and I appreciate everything that you're doing. It's kind of funny to follow Secretary Vilsack because after we produced the ReFed roadmap in 2016, I was able to get a meeting with the Secretary and took the beautiful 100-page roadmap that we had created and went into his office and had what should have been a short conversation, but it extended a longer conversation talking about food waste. And it was really the beginning of ReFed at that point in time, and the recognition that we needed to be more than just a 100-page printed roadmap, but needed to do something to help facilitate the work that everybody else was doing. For those who know me, I often talk, and I know the ReFed team does, I often talk about the big tent. If you could go back the slide for a second, if you don't mind. I only have 2 slides that we put together this morning, so thanks. But I talk about the big tent, and I think for a moment, if you can imagine that we were under a tent, because the tent represents getting people together, people from different backgrounds. And in our case, the whole concept of ReFed started with an idea that started at our farm, and that's my wife, Betsy, who really was the inspiration of food waste. It was our farm, she was the farmer, and food waste was very important to her. We had a tent in Millstone, and you could see people eating the tent. We probably had a group of 60 people who were our grantees from our foundation, who we brought together. And it was the first example of we bringing people together who were all working on different aspects of food waste, and we brought them together to share ideas. And it was from that tent there that was the idea of that ReFed. If you can advance now for a second. And then if you just fast forward to 2016, and there's Sarah Barrett, who was really the leader of creating the ReFed roadmap and instrumental in the organization for the founding years. And there's Dana, and I think Congresswoman Pingree as well. And Dana, so involved in the creation of the roadmap, and what Dana has done and the organization has done now is amazing. And so you're here for 2 days to talk about everything about food waste, and you're not talking about ReFed, and the ReFed people aren't saying much. But I just have to say that it is an amazing organization, and the work that's done behind the scenes just to enable the connections of everybody in this room and people outside this room to make things happen. So the tent started off with a little tent, really was. This is at the Stanford launch in 2016. I know there are some people who are in the room who were there. And then we started summits. I think the first one might have been in Cambridge. And look to what it's grown now. And it's not a numbers game, and it's really more about the quality of what happens at the summit of sharing ideas.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Jesse. Well, again, we're wrapping up this morning's session talking about scale. Obviously, ReFed is scale. This event has scale. So I'm just curious if you can help us define, what scale means to you, and what do you think are some of the important components of scale as we think about solutions in our space?
Right. I think that an organization, and I really don't make the distinction between a for-profit and a nonprofit, because they're essentially organizations that just have different tax status. And what's happening these days is for-profits are figuring out how to have a nonprofit or a social arm, and nonprofits are always figuring out how to have either for-profit or revenue. So it's really just comes at the end of the day of where you file your taxes and who are your funders. And I don't know if everyone agrees with me, but that's how I look at it. So I think that scale and acceleration, when you start a business, and these guys have done an amazing job, we'll talk more about it, you're starting with an idea, you're starting with a vision, and you're starting with a team. And over time, hopefully the vision is still the vision, but there's different permutations of the vision. The team changes, and it's often like a relay race where you have in a typical relay race with 4 people running or 4 people swimming, there are different roles, and that's in organizations. You know, there are people who start it, and then there are people who come along at each different time. I've been involved as the first person, mostly the first person in relay, and I think the key thing is to remember when you need to let go and let the next person or team who might be just better at making that happen. So I think having a vision is number one, having a team and recognizing that the team will change. The team needs to grow as an organization grows. Timing is huge. I think it's often Claire, who works with me as a surfer, and I think timing in business and timing in organizations is like riding a wave, and just knowing when to get up and how to stay on it. And timing really matters. REFED, we've been at this for such a long time, and I think the wave was maybe just starting. Dana and Emily and others were involved way before I was in doing it, and the wave is cresting, and now to come back and have the Secretary of Agriculture here in front of 700 people, to me, it feels like there's real power in the wave to make it happen. And I think the last part is money. And you have to have money. As an organization, you have to have money. As or a company, you have to have money. And you have to have money because of the timing. You may have a great idea, but you just may be off. Or you may have a great idea and COVID hits. So if there's money or access to money, it just gives the opportunity to withstand all the different changes, to give you the opportunity to grow and accelerate. So those are the 4 things I would say.
Yeah. Thanks, Jesse. Well, I definitely want to hit on some of those topics as we move to Josh and Seth here. But maybe, Josh, let's start with you for a question here. Why don't you summarize the wave that Jesse just talked about for us? And maybe a single word, if you can. Like, how would you describe what it's been like to ride this wave as a food waste entrepreneur?
Yeah.
And tell a story about that.
I will, and I'm laughing as you're saying the relay thing because everybody has dealt with this in one way or another, but you're like, there's points also where you try to hand off the baton and there's nobody there, and you're like, I guess I have to keep running here. And you're just like, I guess I'm going longer. So thinking about like one word to put into perspective is obviously very difficult, but what I came up with for us in the journey, and for reference, Flash Food, we took the discount food rack, made it look cool, put it on your cell phone, and we're doing that to feed families, not landfills, helping food in its last 48 hours of shelf life, call it. And the word that I came up with is 2 words, but it's Rubik's Cube. And for me, at least, Rubik's Cubes are basically impossible. And so that's more or less what the journey's been like as we've been building. And a couple things, there's other words that come to mind too, and I'll tell the story that's made it. And everybody in this room will have a similar story that's made you be like, I need to keep doing this thing. But through COVID, there was a young mother who wrote into us, and she was, they had 3 kids in the family, and her husband had got laid off. And she wrote in, she's like, without Flash Food, I couldn't afford to feed my kids what I'm feeding them right now. And it was around Christmas. Thank you. It was around Christmas, and the family didn't have much. And she's like, without Flash Food, I couldn't afford to feed my kids what we're able to feed them now. And then because of the money that we saved on Flash Food, we were actually able to buy them Christmas gifts. And we filled their stockings with a bunch of candy. And to see the look on the kids' faces when they came in the room and they saw all their stockings full was just like something that we never anticipated being able to do. And like that thing hit, that story hit, and it's like purpose, humility, we need to keep going. And so for us at least, it's just been, how does everybody individually in the organization share those stories and then partner with others in this room that are doing similar things in different iterations to keep solving this for more people? Because like Dana said, this is a dumb problem, and collectively we can solve it, but it's going to take a partnership.
That's great. And I just want to reflect on that. I mean, I know there's a lot of solution providers in this room that have been working at this for a long time. So it's great to hear stories like that. And I'm sure a lot of you have moments like that that really have said to you, I'm going to keep going at this and it's worthwhile. So thank you for that. Maybe Seth?
Yeah. The word that I thought of, as we took our company from startup to scale, is chutzpah. Some of you know the word. Audacity. An example is, we didn't get into food waste until 2015. My brother and I started the company in 2011. and we primarily work with large national manufacturing companies. And our biggest concentration is working with food and beverage companies. We had a company engage with us in 2014. We hadn't done business with them before, a large food manufacturer. And they had a mandate to be a zero landfill company by the middle of 2015. And their waste and recycling program was decentralized, meaning each individual manufacturing site was choosing their own vendors for all the different waste streams that they were generating at each site. And they recognized that in order to meet their zero landfill goal, they needed a partner to work with. And they chose us, and we were able to successfully get them to zero landfill by the date that they wanted to get there. Pretty quickly after that, they called us and they said, hey, we love this centralized model. How would you feel about managing all of our food waste, helping us drive down our costs as it relates to food waste recycling, but also help us divert a lot of food waste from landfill? Because one of the things that we noticed when we were helping them on their journey to zero landfill was there was a lot of food waste going to the landfill. And in the corporate world, the easy button to declare that you're zero landfill is simply shifting what's going from the landfill to a waste-to-energy facility like Covanta. And we were able to help them divert a lot of material out of the landfill streams, but we were not educated in food waste enough to know how to divert that. So they asked us if we could do it, and like any good entrepreneur, the answer is yes. And at that point, we were literally managing 0 pounds of food waste. And so I got off the call. My immediate reaction was, what did I just sign up for? But then we got to work. And so, having the grit and taking the chance to say, I believe in myself, I believe in our people, that we can figure out something to solve a problem for a major competitor is scary, but it's those types of decisions that are pivotal in any entrepreneur's journey to go from startup to scale.
Thank you.
Absolutely. I love that story. Thank you, Seth. Well, just keeping time rolling forward here, I'm going to combine a couple of questions here. I'm curious, as you both have kind of reached the scales that you have, what have you learned as some of the non-negotiables that you needed to get right? Or looking back, you wish you had gotten right sooner than you did? And if you can also incorporate some of your stories around your funding strategies, because you both have employed different funding strategies for your businesses, and capital is incredibly important for our space. So would love to hear your perspectives on that. Maybe Seth, I'd love to start with you.
Yeah, absolutely. So some context about our business. I run the business with my brother, Noah, and our family's been in the recycling industry for 5 generations. And we grew up working in the legacy family business, which in all honesty was a very toxic workplace culture. And we made the tough decision to exit out of the legacy family business in 2011 and start our own business. It was hard to do that, but what was so important to us is that we were going to build a company that was based on, having a place to work where people who worked there felt safe, they felt valued, they believed in what we were doing, that everything that we were going to do was going to be done with integrity and is going to be done the right way. And we established core values that are non-negotiable. And so, my point is that culture is the most important thing, in my opinion, to building a successful business. It's the foundation for our success, and we always make sure that foundation is rock solid. Because if you build anything on top of a foundation that is unstable, eventually it'll topple. So every decision that we make, every strategic decision that we're thinking about is always bounced off of our core values. And if it doesn't fit, we don't do it. And if that costs us money, that's okay. And if we lose superstar people in our organization because they don't fit into how we operate as an organization, that's okay. It might short term hurt the bottom line, but long term it's going to damage the business. So that is the critical component to our success is our culture. The other thing we are an asset light organization. We work with our national clients at all of their different facilities, and we are responsible for moving their waste and recycling from point A to point B. But we don't own any trucks. We don't own any facilities. But as anybody here who's in manufacturing or deals with waste, when waste needs to get picked up, we have to pick it up when it's ready to be picked up, because the risk of not picking it up is that you can shut down a facility. And so from the beginning, executing flawlessly is just part of our culture, and making sure that when our clients need service, we service them, and we respond to them immediately. Because even though we're not actually operating the trucks that are picking up the product, it's our credibility on the line to make sure that the service is impeccable. And the final thing that's a non-negotiable is relationships. All business is relationships between one individual and another. And we've been very successful when we recruit people to join our organization to recruit and hire a lot of younger people, a lot of millennials, a lot of Gen Zs. And it's kind of like, and the communication styles are different. And like for example, like I have three children who are in their late teens, early 20s. I'll call them on the phone and they don't pick up. And instead I get a text response, "What's up?" "Oh, well, I'd like to have a conversation with you." "Why?" "Because I love you and I would like to speak with you." But my point is that though the younger generations, they're so used to communicating via text and email, those habits come with them into the workplace. So we really coach our people to have live conversations, to go and visit with people, to take them out for a meal, to develop relationships. Because if you have strong relationships with your customers, with your channel partners, with the people internally in the organization, that creates a much more credible, trusting environment in which to do great things. And just quickly, because I want to make sure Josh has time to talk, Noah and I were fortunate from a funding perspective that we did exit a family business. We were able to take a few clients with us, a few employees with us, and we've been self-funded since the start. We haven't had to bring out any outside capital. We did do a transaction with a private equity firm a couple of years ago to help us accelerate our growth, but we were able to be self-funded.
I completely echo all things on culture, and you need the right people who have the right reasons for being there. For us, flash food solving a really specific problem for really specific partners, and it's like that last 48 hours on behalf of retailers. And I think the non-negotiable that's tangible for us, and I think is important to other people in the room in this space, is identify who you're helping win, and then identify financially and for the reasons that they care about how that's helping them. And for us, like our partners are retailers, and we need to do whatever we can to make this as simple as it can ever be for the retailer, and that they're winning and that it fits into their model and it solves a problem for them, and provide the software for doing so, because what that enables is consumers to save up to 50% on their groceries. So the whole flywheel for us works as long as we never lose sight of this is a tool for the retailer to win and to reduce their waste in the last little bucket of food that they would have. And then interestingly for us and different is we're venture backed. So General Catalyst led our seed round, S2G led our Series A round, and with that comes a certain expectation on returns and how fast you have to go and how you have to invest your money. And I think what I'm fortunate of, and we are fortunate of more than anything, is that we have stakeholders, shareholders, board members who, interestingly enough, like are not on their way up in the venture industry. These people have all built and sold and scaled and are investing basically their own money. So they're at the senior levels, and they're helping us because they want to see us succeed, not because they're trying to get a promotion in a venture fund. And there's just a very different dynamic around that. It gives you a different level of advice, I'll say. You need to be doing this, or you need to be better at that. But I think the alignment from people that care, that want to see a real output and something solved in a real way has been really special for us, and we're really fortunate about it.
That's great. And maybe, Jesse, I'm going to come back to you just with some final thoughts on any tips or advice you have for the room in terms of scaling businesses. But before we do that, I just want to acknowledge what you said, Josh. We've heard, I think, on the panel the importance of the team you build. I think we all know that. But especially when you're thinking about your cap table, understanding they're an extension of your team. So who you have around you is really important. And are they in the same mindset as you are to help you scale is really important. So thank you for pointing that out. But Jesse, as we reach the end of our time here, just any last words from you, thoughts or advice on how to scale solutions in the sector?
Well, it's great hearing your stories, and I want to hear more. I started off by saying that the silos of for-profit and nonprofit are getting blurred. You have to be careful, make sure that you don't blur them tax-wise and legally, but so that's happened with funding too. And I think I would echo these guys. Values alignment is what I would say, is that at the end of the day, the management team, the founders, the management team have a set of values. And when you're hiring staff, they have a set of values. And when you're getting financial, whether it's a philanthropic funders who are coming in or commercial investors, really making sure that the values are aligned. The problems that I have seen in nonprofit organizations and for-profit companies is when there's not an alignment of values, and it's forcing a company or an organization to have to go in different ways and not be able to stay to their true north. So picking your partners, picking your employees and your funding partners, if you have that choice, is key. And once again, I just want to say this is just really cool to be up here.
Well, please join me in a round of applause for our panel. And we'll bring up Christina again.
That was awesome. One more round of applause for all of our speakers this morning who gave us such a great jump start to the day for the 2 days. So thank you all. And to Secretary Vilsack and Dana, who are not in this room, I don't think. Okay. We're about to have our first coffee break. There's probably snacks, I assume. There'll be a number of these breaks. Please, as I said earlier, introduce yourselves. Look for the people with red lanyards. Look for people who maybe don't know everyone. Then the no-host dinner sign-up. This is your last chance to sign up. Again, that should be outside these doors. We will have lunch. Lunch will also be served here, buffet lunch. So be back here at wait. This is awkward. Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, okay. So there's a breakout session starting at 11. That's the part I missed. Breakout session starting at 11. Please try to be on time. We are starting on time. As you can see, packed schedule as always. So please try to be in the session you want to be at 11. Lunch will be served here at 12 till 1:30. We'll have some afternoon sessions. There's plenty of breakout sessions. If you want to ask questions about which session to go to, please find someone from Refed. And then we're all going to meet back here at 4 o'clock. So I will see you here. Enjoy the next few hours, and we'll see you then.